Minori lived a life that many would call a dream. Even after 15 years of marriage, the spark between her and her husband was still as bright as ever. He wasn't just her husband, he was her first love from high school. They had held hands from the school hallways all the way to the altar, painting a picture-perfect romance that everyone envied. Minori truly believed she was the happiest woman in the world until the day her husband accidentally left his phone at home. A notification popped up on the screen. It was a message from someone asking to meet him at a jewelry store later that afternoon. Even though she didn't know the sender, Minori's intuition immediately kicked in. She remembered her husband telling her just yesterday that he had a lunch meeting with a colleague today. So why was the location in the text a jewelry store? She couldn't understand why he would feel the need to lie to her. "I'm so sorry, honey, I forgot my phone," he said when he rushed back. "Here it is," Minori replied calmly. "Thank you, I appreciate it." Seeking clarity, Minori quickly went to a law office to ask for advice, where her best friend happened to work. After hearing the story, her friend suggested that Minori might just be overthinking things. After all, her husband had always been incredibly sweet to her. She pointed out that they might have just met at the jewelry store before going to lunch, or perhaps he was simply planning a surprise gift for her. Her friend urged her not to worry. You see, Minori had always been a naturally suspicious person, but her husband had spent the last 15 years working tirelessly to maintain their happiness. Because of this, her friend had total confidence in him. And honestly, Yudai, that's her husband's name, had a spotless reputation. Everyone who met him sang his praises. Not only was he handsome, but he was also highly successful, making him the heartthrob of many women at his company. Yet, he never allowed himself to be caught up in a single rumor. When his coworkers found out his wife was his high school sweetheart, their admiration for him only grew. That's why her friend told her to just let it go. Even though those words offered some comfort, Minori couldn't shake the nagging feeling of unease. When she got home, her husband had already picked up their son from school, and the two of them were busy preparing dinner for her. Looking at the perfect man standing before her, a wave of happiness washed over her, making her temporarily forget her doubts. She told herself she was being too sensitive if he wanted to cheat. He probably would have done it a long time ago in their 15-year marriage. But that night, Yudai's phone buzzed again, and Minori's anxiety came rushing back. She decided to sneak a look at the screen. "See you tomorrow. Good night." There was no way a colleague would send a text like that. Determined to find the truth, Minori secretly followed her husband to the jewelry store the next day. To her absolute shock, the person he met there was a high school boy. "A student?" she whispered to herself. Moving closer to get a better look, she saw Yudai and the boy acting incredibly affectionate, just like a couple in love. Was it possible that this boy was the one he was having an affair with? A short while later, the two went to a high-end restaurant. The atmosphere between them was relaxed and intimate, as if they had known each other for a lifetime. Minori could hardly believe her eyes. She felt like she was about to collapse. Right then, a woman walked up and casually sat down next to Yudai. Seeing how close they were, it became clear that this woman was likely his actual mistress. In an instant, the scene transformed into a picture of a perfectly happy family of three. A sharp pain surged through Minori's heart. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A waiter brought out a cake, and the woman happily blew out the candles. Then, the high school boy took out the jewelry they had just bought and gave it to her, while Yudai gently placed a necklace around the woman's neck. Minori was now certain. The connection between these three was anything but ordinary. The next day, Minori returned to her best friend to pour her heart out. This time, her friend's tone changed. She advised Minori to start gathering every bit of evidence she could find so she could file for divorce. "What? You can't just turn a blind eye to this," she urged. The following Tuesday, Yudai claimed he was going out for drinks with some old middle school friends. Instead of staying home, Minori followed him again. This time, he led her to a hair salon. And just as she suspected, a few moments later, that same woman from the restaurant appeared. Even though every fiber of her being wanted to deny it, the truth was now laid bare right in front of her eyes. Minori had to steel herself, forcing her shaking hands to stay steady long enough to snap photos of everything as proof. It wasn't until she watched her husband walk through the front door of that woman's house that the bitter reality finally sank in. She was consumed by one question. Just how long had Yudai been living this double life? That evening, while her husband was in the shower, Minori seized the chance to grab his phone. She was desperate for evidence, but every passcode she tried came back as incorrect. Suddenly, the phone began to vibrate. The sound caught Yudai's attention from the bathroom, and Minori's heart nearly stopped. She was seconds away from being caught red-handed. Later, when she showed the photos she had taken to her best friend, the lawyer recognized the woman immediately. Her name was Riko, a girl they had gone to high school with. Her friend remembered that back then, there was a female student who constantly sought out Yudai. Minori raced home and dug through her old things, until she found her high school graduation yearbook. Sure enough, there was a girl named Riko. Minori was stunned. Could it be that they had been together since their school days? That night, Minori tried one last combination to unlock her husband's phone. Riko's birthday. It worked. The phone unlocked instantly. Inside, she found a digital gallery of betrayal, countless photos of the three of them together. It was clear from the pictures that Yudai had been by their side for a very long time. He had been there for every milestone in that boy's life since he was a toddler. Minori's heart didn't just break. It shattered into a million pieces. Her lawyer friend couldn't find much official information on the student, but she confirmed his name was Wataru, and he used his mother's last name, so he wasn't legally registered as Yudai's son. Regardless, there was more than enough evidence to file for divorce and demand a massive settlement. Wait, only a few million yen in compensation? Minori asked, disappointed. Her friend was sympathetic, but explained that since infidelity isn't a major criminal offense, the law could only do so much. She promised to fight for the highest payout possible. At that moment, Minori had a chilling realization. The law doesn't protect the sanctity of marriage. It only protects assets. If that was the case, she would take matters into her own hands to make Yudai pay a price far steeper than money. She knew that for any parent, their child is their most precious possession. She thought to herself, if you stole my husband, then I am going to steal your son. Minori moved fast, landing a job as a substitute teacher at the very high school Wataru attended. Just by looking into Wataru's eyes, she could tell the young man was already infatuated with her. Wataru was handsome and had plenty of girls chasing him, but they were all shy teenagers who played it slow. Conversely, Minori understood very well what would easily excite someone at this age. Your tie is loose. Minori tried every way to get closer to Wataru, her actions making him shy and embarrassed. She was sure she would soon have Wataru under her control. Seeing Minori start working, her mother-in-law couldn't help but wonder. She explained that now that her son was older, she was bored staying home all the time and wanted to go back to work to clear her mind. She was only a part-time teacher, only needing to go to school 2 days a week, so it certainly wouldn't affect her family responsibilities. Fearing her daughter-in-law might misunderstand, the mother-in-law quickly explained that she didn't intend to forbid her from working, as long as the two of them agreed. Yudai fully supports you, she said. Really? That's good then. Minori had always wondered if Wataru was her husband's illegitimate child, and she wanted to verify this herself. Wataru's English grades weren't good, and with the semester exams approaching, Minori wanted to tutor him after school. To make studying less boring, Minori even told Wataru to set his own goals and rewards, which would motivate him. Rewards? Yes. If you achieve your target score, I'll reward you. Seeing the doll hanging on Wataru's backpack, Minori mentioned she was also playing the game. Hearing this, Wataru immediately became excited, his eyes lighting up in surprise. He seemed to really enjoy the game. Therefore, Minori decided to give him VIP items if he scored 85 points on the upcoming test. Really? Of course you should try your best. Yes, I'll do my best. To pull off her plan, Minori had been doing her homework. She secretly dug into everything Wataru liked, using his hobbies to systematically break down his walls. It worked perfectly. The boy completely let his guard down around her. Her next move was to start probing into his family life, but when she shared her progress with her best friend, the lawyer didn't look happy at all. Even though she was still helping Minori with the legal side, she was terrified that things were going way too far. She had witnessed Minori and Yudai's entire love story. She still remembered how radiant Minori looked on their wedding day. She told Minori that while what Yudai did was unforgivable, they still needed to have a face-to-face talk, if not for themselves, then for the sake of their 5-year-old son. Her friend's words actually shook Minori. She decided to give Yudai one final chance to come clean. Yudai? Listen, she said over the phone. Please come home early tonight. I have something important to talk to you about. Can you do that? Sure, I remember. I'll be there, he promised. Meanwhile, Wataru had been studying like a man possessed. His grades were skyrocketing, and he even managed to crush his goal of hitting an 85. As promised, Minori gifted him a bunch of high-end VIP items in his favorite game. Just as Wataru was about to test out his new gear, his phone rang. It was Yudai. Apparently, the moment he heard about the test scores from Riko, he called immediately to congratulate the boy. Thanks, Dad, Wataru said into the phone. Wait, did Mom already tell you? Hearing those words, Minori felt a chill. She knew exactly who was on the other end of that line. Yeah. You booked a restaurant? No, that's okay, I have to go. I'm still in class, Wataru said before hanging up. The horrific memories of her husband's betrayal flashed through Minori's mind like a nightmare. Trembling with rage, she demanded to know if that was his father who just called. Wataru went silent, falling into a deep, hesitant reflection. Finally, he spoke. He explained that Yudai was like a father, but also not his father. To be more precise, he was the man who had raised him and cared for him as if they shared the same blood. Like a father? Minori pressed. It turned out that Wataru's biological father had abandoned his mother before he was even born. He had zero memories of the man, and his mother never mentioned him. Since he was a small child, Yudai had always been there to look after him because his mother was constantly buried in work. Yudai was the only person he had to play with. As he grew older, he realized Yudai was his mother's boyfriend. For the three of them, being together like a family had simply become a way of life. Minori pushed further, asking if he ever wondered why his mother and Yudai never actually got married. But before Wataru could answer, a teacher rushed frantically into the room. She gasped out the news. Wataru's mother had collapsed and was being rushed to the hospital. Without a second thought, Wataru bolted out the door. Now, Minori finally knew for sure that Wataru wasn't Yudai's biological son, but she still had so many unanswered questions. She was also terrified of one thing. If Yudai found out Riko was in the hospital, would he run to her? Sure enough, a short while later, Minori's phone buzzed. It was a text from Yudai. I have to work late tonight, so I won't be able to make it home early. The lie hit her like a physical blow. Minori immediately drove to the hospital. She had to see it for herself. When she found Riko's room and peeked inside, her husband was nowhere to be seen. For a split second, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she was being too sensitive. Maybe he wouldn't actually abandon his wife and child for another woman. But just as she turned to leave, a familiar figure brushed past her. It was Yudai. He didn't even notice his own wife as he ran straight into Riko's room. As Minori stood there in the hallway, trying to catch any sound from inside the room, her phone rang. It was the school principal calling her. That night, Yudai never came home. I'm so sorry. Minori whispered to herself, sitting alone in the dark living room all night. She had intended to have one last honest conversation to save their marriage, but she realized now it was completely pointless. He had made his choice. He chose his mistress and a son who wasn't even his over Minori and their own child. The marriage was officially dead, and the pain transformed into a cold, hard resolve. Minori was more determined than ever to see her revenge through to the end. The next day at school, Wataru approached her, looking incredibly guilty for running out of class without permission. He looked her in the eyes and begged her to continue being his tutor. Wataru explained that his mother had fainted from pure exhaustion from overworking. Because of this, he was more determined than ever to study hard, get into a prestigious university, and find a high-paying job just to lighten her burden. Minori looked at him and dropped a bombshell. Well, you're about to become an older brother anyway. Wait, what? Wataru asked, stunned. The weight of her own words hit Minori hard. After realizing that Riko was actually pregnant with her husband's child, Minori was so traumatized that she developed a high fever and fainted. Her mother-in-law stepped in, reminding her not to overwork herself and promising to help with the chores. Ever since Minori went back to work, she looked like she had lost a significant amount of weight. When she told her mother-in-law that she had lost her appetite lately, the older woman kindly made her some porridge. But after just a few spoonfuls, Minori couldn't hold it down and began vomiting uncontrollably. Her mother-in-law immediately suspected she was pregnant and urged her to go to the hospital for a checkup. However, Minori knew deep down that this was impossible. She and her husband hadn't touched each other in a very long time. Even so, a tiny part of her held onto a shred of hope. She decided to take a pregnancy test anyway, thinking that maybe, just maybe, if she were actually pregnant, Yudai would finally come back to her. But as is often the case, reality was far more cruel. The test was negative. Minori was drowning in depression. Knowing her husband was a cheater while having to act like everything was fine was making her feel like she was suffocating. Suddenly, Wataru appeared out of nowhere. Teacher? Wow, what a coincidence. I didn't think I'd run into you here, she said, trying to act normal. Actually, it's not a coincidence, Wataru admitted. He confessed that he had been coming to this local market every single day just to wait for her, ever since he found out she lived in this neighborhood. Since their last tutoring session, Minori hadn't returned to school, and Wataru was terrified that he had said something wrong to upset her. You're overthinking it, Minori reassured him. I just haven't worked in a long time, so I've been feeling a bit drained. She then reminded Wataru to stop worrying about her and focus on taking care of his mother. Yeah, she's doing much better now, he replied. At this point, Minori couldn't suppress her curiosity any longer. She needed to know how her husband reacted to the news of Riko's pregnancy, so she asked Wataru about it. The boy told her that Yudai seemed incredibly happy and was dying to hold the baby in his arms. He even complained that 10 months was way too long to wait. Most painfully, he added that Yudai had promised to finally marry his mother, just said the timing wasn't right yet. To Minori, these words felt like a bolt of lightning hitting her heart. She stood there frozen, her face turning pale and dark. After a moment to regain her composure, she quickly said goodbye to Wataru and hurried home. That evening, Yudai actually acted concerned. His mother had told him about Minori's health, and he asked how she was doing. I'm okay now, Minori said coldly. That's good then, he replied dismissively. Yudai's indifferent attitude made her blood boil. When his mistress fainted, he frantically dropped everything to be at her side. But when his own wife was sick, she only got a few half-hearted words. Minori decided it was time to make her move. She had to see for herself exactly what kind of charm Riko possessed that made her husband so head over heels in love. She walked into the hair salon where Riko worked. Riko, you have a new client, someone called out. When Riko turned around, she was paralyzed with shock to see Minori standing there. She never expected her boyfriend's wife to actually hunt her down. In that moment, Riko could only pray that Minori was still in the dark about the affair. Welcome, Riko said, trying to stay professional. Seeing how calm Minori appeared, Riko relaxed a tiny bit. She enthusiastically asked Minori what kind of style she wanted. I want to cut it short. It's gotten so long that it's starting to get in the way, Minori replied. I understand, Riko said. Minori then went out of her way to compliment the necklace Riko was wearing. Riko casually shared that it was a birthday gift from her son. How old is your son? Minori asked. He's 18 this year? Really? I had no idea you had a son that old? Yes, Riko replied. Minori continued to praise Riko's son, calling him such a filial and devoted boy for buying his mother such an expensive gift. Then, Minori strategically flashed the bracelet on her own wrist. And this? This was a gift from my husband. As they spoke, Riko began showing obvious signs of pregnancy. She suddenly felt a wave of nausea and rushed to the restroom to compose herself and organize her messy thoughts. She and Yudai had been together for over a decade without ever being caught, so why was Minori showing up the moment she got pregnant? Riko was terrified that this was no coincidence. Are you okay? Minori asked through the door. What? Oh yes, I'm just worried because you look a bit pale. Are you pregnant, by any chance? Minori then added, with a sharp edge to her voice, that pregnant women with morning sickness must be exhausted, and they definitely need their husbands by their side. Years ago, Yudai had always been by Riko's side, caring for her and helping her get through the darkest times. Listening to Riko claim she was currently single, Minori put on a curious face and asked about the father of the new baby. Raising 2 children as a single mother is no easy feat, Minori remarked. My eldest son is already in high school, Riko replied. Doesn't that make it even more worrying? Why do you say that? Well, he's at that age where boys go through a lot of physical and psychological changes, right? Oh, my son isn't interested in that kind of stuff, Riko insisted. No way. Every child is like that at his age, Minori countered. Then, acting like a concerned friend, Minori planted a seed of doubt about the man in Riko's life. If he were a truly good man, he should have proposed to you the second he found out you were pregnant. Riko was left speechless, not knowing how to respond. Just then, a coworker interrupted. Riko, you have a phone call. The call broke the tension, but Minori's words had already done their job. Riko was now feeling incredibly anxious. She needed to know exactly when Yudai planned to make things official and marry her. She thought about texting him but decided it was a conversation they needed to have face to face. The next day, Minori returned to school. When Wataru saw her new short haircut, he turned bright red and stammered a compliment. It looks really good on you. He was so shy he couldn't even look her in the eye. As Minori caught the scent of his cologne, she knew for certain he had swallowed the bait. You smell nice today. Are you wearing perfume? She asked. Yes, I am, he admitted. Meanwhile, ever since Riko got pregnant, Yudai had started coming home much more often. He began helping with the kids and the housework, and his words became noticeably sweeter. Occasionally, he would even try to get clingy with Minori. I've been so lonely lately, he'd whine. Don't you dare touch me with those filthy hands, Minori thought to herself, recoiling in disgust. She fought to keep her composure, remembering her friend's warning. If you're determined to get revenge, you must not let him find out until the trap is set. So she continued to play the part of the perfect, devoted wife. That night, Wataru took the initiative and messaged Minori, asking her out for coffee over the weekend. It seemed Riko had also noticed her son's strange behavior. When she accidentally found a bottle of perfume on his desk, Minori's words echoed in her head. My son isn't interested in those things, versus every kid is like that at his age. Gripped by worry, Riko decided to snoop through her son's computer. The messages were right there on the screen. Even though she didn't know who the other woman was, a wave of unease washed over her. She secretly noted the address and time of the meeting. She wanted to see exactly who had managed to steal her innocent son's heart. Riko rushed to the cafe, but in her desperation, she mistook someone else for the girl. By then, it was too late. Wataru and Minori had already left together. Minori pushed Wataru for the real reason he wanted to see her. He confessed that he noticed her behavior had been strange ever since he told her about his family. Minori quickly covered, saying she was just worried that his family situation might affect his focus on the upcoming exams. Hearing this, Wataru admitted his family life was a bit complicated and hard to explain in just a few words. If you really want to hear it, I'll tell you, he said. Do you trust me? Minori asked. Of course I do. Are they having an affair? Minori probed. Wait, what? Wataru looked surprised. He then confessed that his mother was dating a married man. However, he didn't think his mother had done anything wrong. In his eyes, the man was a good person, and the two of them were together by choice. He believed love itself wasn't a crime. As long as his mother was happy, he could accept anything. Furthermore, even though they weren't married, Yudai had taken care of them for over a decade, which Wataru saw as proof that he was a highly responsible man. But that's not right, Minori snapped. Wataru doubled down, arguing that Yudai must have a reason for the affair. He suggested that Yudai's previous marriage was likely a mistake from the start, forcing him to make a choice that went against his conscience. He was convinced Yudai wasn't a bad person. Hearing this, Minori was consumed by a cold rage. She couldn't believe how selfish he was willing to push another family into an abyss just for his own happiness. Although she couldn't scold him directly without blowing her cover, she couldn't stand to continue the conversation. I have to go home now, she said abruptly. Wait, Ms. Minori, Wataru called out. He couldn't understand why she had become so agitated all of a sudden. What he didn't know was that Minori's reaction wasn't just about him. It turned out she had grown up with a childhood exactly like his. From the time she was a little girl, Minori never knew who her father was. Her only childhood memory of him was the sight of her mother constantly crying in secret. Even when her mother finally passed away, her father never showed his face. That was the moment Minori learned the dark truth about her existence. People in town whispered cruelly, saying her mother's death was karma for having an affair and giving birth to a mistress's child. Luckily, her grandfather stepped in and raised her. Because her mother had loved a man she shouldn't have, she had created a lifelong tragedy. As a result, Minori grew up feeling like a child born of sin, never daring to live with her head held high. She truly didn't want not a single percento ever end up in a situation like hers. I'm so sorry, I didn't think about how you felt, Wataru said, looking at her. Because she didn't want to die alone and forgotten like her mother, Minori had been obsessed since childhood with building a happy, stable marriage. I worked so hard. I did everything just to be happy, she whispered. Suddenly her phone rang. Hello, Yudai? Hearing the name, Wataru nervously asked who was on the line. It's my husband, Minori said, her voice turning ice cold. The same man you look up to as a father. Wataru froze. He was completely stunned, convinced for a moment that his teacher was playing a sick joke on him. Do you really think a coincidence like this just happens? Minori snapped. You and your mother destroyed my family. I hate both of you to my very core. Without another word, she turned her back and walked away, leaving him in shock. At the same time, Riko was frantic because she couldn't find her son. She knew something was wrong. She told herself that if Wataru got hurt in any of this, she would never forgive Minori. After a while, Minori calmed down and realized she might have reacted too explosively. However, when she thought about how Wataru didn't seem to show a single ounce of guilt, her anger flared up again. No guilt? Fine, I'm definitely not letting this go. Riko eventually went to a park near Minori's house and saw Yudai playing with his son. She tried to probe for information, and Yudai mentioned that Minori was out meeting a friend, though he didn't know which one, as he claimed he didn't interfere in her private life. Riko waited anxiously for Wataru to come home, but the moment he walked through the door, she tried to ask him what happened. He brushed her off and retreated to his room. When he opened his laptop, he discovered that Minori had blocked him. A sudden, crushing sense of loss washed over him. The next day at school, the students were buzzing with gossip. Minori had resigned. Why would she just quit? That's so irresponsible, they complained. Minori's lawyer friend thought she had been way too impulsive. She was certain Wataru had told his mother everything, and that Yudai probably knew the truth by now. All their hard work was about to go down the drain. Just then, a text from Yudai popped up on Minori's phone. He said they had something important to discuss. Based on her legal experience, the friend warned Minori that Yudai was likely just pretending to be sorry because he'd been caught. She warned that after a little while, he'd go right back to his cheating ways, maybe even more shamelessly than before. Tonight, the first thing he'll do is apologize, she told Minori. She warned her not to be soft-hearted. His only goal was to lower the divorce settlement payout. When her mother-in-law found out Minori had quit her job, she was deeply concerned. You said you enjoyed working? Why the sudden resignation? She did her best to comfort Minori, making it clear she would always support her. Hearing those kind words, Minori was moved to tears. She desperately wanted to scream the truth, hoping her mother-in-law would help discipline her pathetic son and make him beg for forgiveness. But reality hit her hard. This marriage was beyond saving. Exactly as the lawyer predicted, the moment Yudai got home, he looked at Minori and said, "I'm sorry, it's over," Minori thought. But the reason for his apology was a complete curveball. "Our son told me your mood hasn't been great lately," Yudai explained. "He even told me it was all my fault. I don't actually know what I did wrong, but I felt I should apologize anyway. Please tell me where I messed up, and I promise I'll try to change." Minori was floored. "You're apologizing? Just for that? Is there something else?" he asked innocently. In that moment, Minori realized Wataru hadn't breathed a word to anyone about her or the affair. She immediately called her friend. They wondered if maybe Wataru was just too busy with exams to talk to his mother. But the friend found that hard to believe. They lived under the same roof. How could he not have found a single chance to tell her? The lawyer friend pointed out a crucial detail. If Wataru really wanted to spill the beans, he could have easily done it with a simple text or a phone call. The fact that he hadn't meant only one thing, Wataru wanted to keep this a secret too. If that was the case, they could find a way to flip him and bring him over to their side. Make him an ally? Minori asked. The friend suspected that Wataru had developed real feelings for Minori, and they could use that crush as a weapon in their revenge plan. He has value as a pawn, the friend whispered. For the past few days, Wataru had been loitering outside the teacher's lounge, but with no luck. Desperate, he decided to take matters into his own hands and go find Minori at her home. At the same time, Riko received a call from the school informing her that her son had skipped class and left the campus. "Ms. Minori," Wataru called out when he saw her. "What's going on?" she asked, surprised. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. "Dad? Wataru?" Yudai stammered. Minori quickly regained her composure after the unexpected face-off with Yudai. She realized he still had no clue about her relationship with Wataru. "Is this a friend of yours, Yudai?" she asked innocently. Yudai scrambled for an excuse, explaining that Wataru was just the son of a friend from college, and they had only met a few times. To cut through the thick tension, Yudai awkwardly introduced his wife and son to Wataru. "Nice to meet you. I'm his wife," Minori said with a fake smile. "I'm Wataru," the boy replied, barely holding it together. Yudai told Minori to head inside first, then pulled Wataru aside under the guise of catching up. Once they were inside, Minori's son mentioned something chilling. He said he had seen a big sister at the park who looked exactly like Wataru. "What big sister?" Minori asked. "Yeah, Dad met her at the park too," the boy added. This sent a shiver down Minori's spine. It meant Riko had been watching them. Was she planning to target Minori's son for revenge? She knew that a child was any mother's greatest weakness. In the other room, the atmosphere was far more violent. Yudai shoved Wataru against a wall and chewed him out. He had strictly warned Wataru never to come near his house, yet both he and Riko kept showing up lately. Wataru apologized and promised to be more careful, but then he couldn't help but drop a comment that left Yudai baffled. "Your wife is really beautiful." "Huh? What are you talking about?" Yudai snapped. "Her style. It's completely different from my mom's," Wataru added. Yudai stood there, speechless and confused. Later that evening, Minori casually asked Yudai what he and Wataru talked about. He gave a vague answer about old times, and Minori didn't push it. Just then, her son asked for some milk. Finding the carton empty, Minori stepped out to the store. To her surprise, Wataru was still lingering outside. The boy apologized for being insensitive to her feelings when they were at the beach earlier, saying he had thought about it a lot. He admitted he felt disgusted that he was benefiting from his mother's illicit affair, and didn't want to run from the truth anymore. Minori, however, cared more about what he said to Yudai. "I asked him if he really planned on marrying my mom," Wataru confessed. That was exactly what Minori wanted to know. According to Wataru, Yudai's answer was as ambiguous as ever, but he did promise Wataru one thing. He loved Riko more than his current wife. Wataru apologized again, knowing how much that would hurt her. but he didn't want to lie to her. Minori looked heartbroken for only a second before she stepped closer to Wataru. She looked him in the eye and asked, "Are you on my side? Would you do anything for me?" That night, Minori returned home very late. As she walked in, she accidentally overheard Yudai on the phone, sounding frantic and stressed. "I know, but if we get caught, all our hard work goes down the drain. When can I finally get the money? We're running out of time. If I don't get it, then my marriage to Minori was completely pointless." Minori was frozen in shock. What did those fragments of conversation mean? She couldn't hold it back, and asked him who he was talking to. Yudai jumped, startled, but seeing Minori's calm face, he assumed she hadn't heard anything suspicious. He quickly blamed it on work, claiming a subordinate named Nana Murai kept making mistakes that were dragging the team down. Even though he thought he had fooled her, Yudai still felt uneasy. He suddenly asked Minori if she was free this Friday. It was their wedding anniversary, something they hadn't celebrated in years. To show his sincerity, he told her he wanted to book a table at a luxury restaurant. After Yudai got home, his mother was already on his case. She reminded him that it had been way too long since he celebrated his wedding anniversary with Minori, and insisted he pick out a gift that actually meant something. She even handpicked a stunning diamond necklace for him to check out. "You have to cherish Minori," she told him. "That's the only way all of us can be happy." In the end, Yudai went all out and booked a table at a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Minori was genuinely touched. It had been 17 years since they first met. But there was one question that had been weighing on her soul for a long time. She looked him in the eye and asked, "In these 17 years, have you ever actually truly loved me?" Caught off guard, Yudai started fumbling for an answer. But right then, Minori's phone buzzed. It was the hospital. Her grandfather had collapsed, and they needed her there immediately. Yudai offered to go with her, but she turned him down. She told him to stay behind and really think about her question. She wanted a real answer when she got back. At the hospital, the doctor delivered a crushing blow. The cancer cells had metastasized. The situation was grim. Minori was overwhelmed with guilt. She had been so consumed by her own marriage drama that she had completely neglected her grandfather's health. He tried to comfort her, saying that life and death are just part of the journey, and he knew his time was coming to an end. But before he passed, he had something massive to tell her. "Don't talk like that, Grandpa. You're going to get better," she cried. He ignored her protest and asked if she knew where her bracelet really came from. She thought it was just a keepsake from her mother, but he revealed the truth. It was an engagement gift from a man named Kishiro, Minori's biological father. Her mother had worked as a sales clerk at a Kishiro jewelry store, where she caught the eye of the chairman of the Kishiro group. Not long after, she got pregnant. But Kishiro already had a family, and he pressured her to get an abortion. She refused, choosing to raise Minori instead. Kishiro gave her a sum of money and cut all contact. On the day her mother died in a car accident, some said she was actually on her way to find him. To this day, the media has never reported on that accident because the Kishiro group used their massive wealth to silence everyone and bury the scandal of the chairman's affair. Back then, Minori's grandfather was so disgusted by Kishiro's cowardice that he told the man never to show his face again. He didn't want Minori calling a man like that father. He had carefully saved the money Kishiro gave her mother all these years, just to give it to Minori now. On top of that, Kishiro had actually left Minori a significant amount of shares in the company. Suddenly finding herself with a massive fortune didn't make Minori feel better, it made her feel empty. No amount of money could buy back her broken life. "My family is already destroyed," she whispered. But then, a realization hit her like a ton of bricks. "When can I finally get the money?" She remembered Yudai's frantic words on the phone. Could the money he was talking about be linked to her secret heritage? She recalled how Yudai was always obsessed with Kishiro news, and always insisted on buying Kishiro brand gifts. But if even she didn't know this secret until now, how could Yudai have known? When she got back home, her mother-in-law acted like the perfect, worried grandmother. Seeing Minori's sad face, she sat down gently and tried to comfort her. "If you're feeling down, you should eat something sweet. Let me go out and buy some treats for you, okay?" "Thank you, Mom. Please be careful," Minori replied, silently thanking God for such a kind and thoughtful mother-in-law. But just as the woman left, her phone, which she'd forgotten on the table, buzzed with a notification. Minori happened to see a message from Yudai, and her heart stopped. It read, "Once we get the money, we have to make our move." As soon as her mother-in-law was out the door, Minori jumped on the computer to verify her darkest suspicions. She managed to log into her mother-in-law's social media account, and what she found was sickening. Yudai, Riko, and her mother-in-law had a private group chat. In that group, they were heartlessly discussing exactly when Minori's grandfather was expected to die so they could claim the inheritance. Minori couldn't believe her eyes. Every single kind word from her mother-in-law had been a lie. Riko even referred to the woman in the chat as her dear mother-in-law. The photos of the three of them together proved that the woman had been on Riko's side from the very beginning. "You absolute scumbags," Minori hissed, her blood boiling with a new level of rage. The mother-in-law returned home with the sweets, still wearing her mask of the caring mother. Minori played right along, matching her performance beat for beat. She needed to know one thing. How on earth did they find out the secret of her birth? She began to skillfully probe into her mother-in-law's past, hoping to find a loose thread. Perhaps because the finish line was in sight, the mother-in-law finally let her guard down. She didn't suspect a thing as she began to reminisce. "This was me when I was young," she boasted, showing Minori old photos. "I was quite popular back then." She told a story about meeting Yudai's father at a beauty pageant. They married soon after and had Yudai, But the marriage was a nightmare. Yudai's father was a gambling addict who left them drowning in debt. After the divorce, she tried to raise Yudai on her own, but no matter how hard she worked, life was a constant struggle. Seeing Yudai deprived of the things other children had broke her heart. Then, one day, she saw a job opening for a housekeeper at a massive corporation. She took a chance, got the job, and their lives finally stabilized. That was also where she met a friend, a woman who worked at the company, but who was secretly the chairman's mistress. Minori felt a chill. She knew instinctively that this friend was her own mother, and the company was the Kishiro Group. The mother-in-law claimed she had tried to warn the woman to stop, telling her that illicit affairs never end well. But the truth was far more sinister. After discovering the affair between the chairman and Minori's mother, the mother-in-law had secretly gathered evidence and sold it to a tabloid for a massive payout. This forced Minori's mother to cut all ties with Kishiro. Of course, once the scandal broke, the mother-in-law was also fired from the Kishiro household. "I heard she died in a car accident later," the woman said callously. That sentence confirmed it for Minori. This woman had been the architect of her mother's misery. Years later, the mother-in-law found out that Kishiro wanted to set aside money to secretly support his illegitimate daughter. This filled her with a fresh wave of jealousy. By a stroke of what she called fate, she discovered that the secret daughter was attending the same high school as Yudai. She saw her chance and pressured Yudai to seduce Minori. At the time, Yudai actually protested, saying he already had a girl he liked. Initially, Yudai was shocked to hear his mother say, "If we marry that girl, we'll have money to spend for the rest of our lives." However, upon understanding his mother's intentions, Yudai quickly agreed because, for him, poverty was the most terrifying thing in the world. Therefore, he abandoned Riko and deliberately pursued Minori. One day, he unexpectedly ran into Riko on the street, and at that moment, Yudai remembered his mother's words. "Don't let it show, just keep 2 women at once." Knowing Yudai's plan, his best friend was furious. Furthermore, according to Japanese law, the money Minori inherited from her grandfather could not be divided with her husband even after a divorce. She was certain Yudai and his mother had other schemes to seize the inheritance. She advised Minori to quickly cut ties with them. "I've already drafted the divorce papers, we can start fighting any time." However, Minori seemed hesitant. She felt Wataru was innocent and didn't want to drag him into this. Her best friend reminded Minori not to be soft-hearted. After all, the student was the son of the mistress, and that fact would never change. Meanwhile, Yudai promised Riko that after Minori transferred all her shares to him, he would divorce her. To be honest, Riko was fed up with Yudai's empty promises. Will things really go as smoothly as planned? Don't worry, Minori is only smart on the outside. She's actually very naive. Suddenly having such a large sum of money, she definitely won't know what to do with it. At that point, just tell her it's for financial investment, and she'll definitely transfer all the money to us. "You know your wife so well," Yudai told Riko to be patient, as there was still a lot of work to be done in the divorce proceedings. "By then, we'll change Tsubasa's name to Kume." As soon as Riko heard the name Kume, her alarm bells went off. She sprinted into Wataru's bedroom and frantically flipped through his test papers. Her heart sank. The tutor's name was indeed Kume. This was no coincidence. Every single clue was pointing to the nightmare Riko was starting to realize. Early the next morning, Wataru was already packing 2 large suitcases. Riko begged him to tell her where he was going, but he wouldn't say a word. She screamed at him to snap out of it, telling him not to be blinded by a pretty face. "Yudai and I are your family. Don't let that woman use you. Her only goal is to get revenge on us." But Wataru dropped a bombshell. He told her he already knew everything, and even if Minori was using him, he was perfectly fine with it. Riko was absolutely devastated. She couldn't wrap her head around why her son would side with the woman trying to destroy them. "We're the victims here. How could you side with her?" Wataru fired back with a question that cut like a knife. He asked her how she could knowingly sleep with a married man for all those years. Didn't she feel a shred of guilt? Or was it because she was the one winning that she couldn't empathize with the pain and desperation of the woman she betrayed? He called her out for being shameless. Riko tried to make excuses, claiming she only wanted a good father for him, but Wataru wasn't buying it. "You just wanted a man for yourself. Stop blaming me." Despite her screams and desperate pleas, Wataru walked out into the pouring rain. Truth be told, Wataru had nowhere to go. He ended up standing on Minori's doorstep, soaking wet and shivering. "What happened to you?" Minori asked, shocked. Fearing he would catch a cold, she gave him a set of Yudai's clothes and told him to shower. A moment later, she realized she'd forgotten to give him a towel. When she opened the bathroom door, the tension was thick. Minori awkwardly looked away, but Wataru seized the moment. He pulled her into a back hug and whispered, "I missed you so much." For a split second, Minori's heart wavered, but then her friend's warning echoed in her head. "He is the mistress's son. You cannot let your guard down now." She calmly dried his hair and asked what happened. He told her he'd fought with his mother and run away. Wataru promised to be her ally and do anything she asked, even if it meant staying away from his own mother. To him, this was the only way to support Minori after all the pain his family had caused her. He apologized from the bottom of his heart. "Stop apologizing," Minori interrupted. Wataru desperately wanted to know what he had to do to earn her forgiveness for his family's sins, but Minori stayed silent. Once the rain let up, she sent him home. Shortly after, her grandfather's health took a turn for the worse. With his very last breath, he used all his strength to whisper one final "I'm sorry" to Minori. For Yudai and his mother, this was the big day they had been waiting for. But just as they were secretly celebrating the coming inheritance, a powerful, mysterious figure walked into the funeral home. It was Minori's father, Ichiro. The guests began to whisper in shock. Yudai and his mother were paralyzed with fear. No one expected the father who had been absent for over 30 years to suddenly show up, and Minori's next move was even more shocking. She took the initiative and addressed him directly. Chairman Kishiro, she told him she knew the truth from her grandfather and that she wanted to know exactly what happened on the day of her mother's accident. Ichiro decided the time for secrets was over. He had come to the funeral prepared to face his past. He revealed that 32 years ago, he had fallen in love with Minori's mother at first sight. Back then, he had just taken over the Kishiro group, and his parents had forced him into an arranged marriage he hated. The weight of his family's expectations was like a mountain crushing him, and Minori's mother was his only source of peace. When she got pregnant, he naively thought he could use the baby as leverage to negotiate with his father and finally marry her. But he quickly realized he had been far too young and foolish to handle the power of the Kishiro dynasty. In the world of the elite, love is often treated as a mere luxurious side dish while marriage is a cold, calculated business deal. Chairman Ichiro explained that Minori's mother, coming from a poor background, stood no chance against his family's strict standards. When their affair was leaked to the tabloids, his father gave him a brutal ultimatum. Cut ties immediately to save the family's honor, or face the consequences. Cowardly and powerless, Ichiro chose to compromise. But on the day of the accident, Minori's mother had taken a desperate risk to find him. She didn't want money, she just wanted him as a father, to see his daughter just once. As a mother, she could feel the deep loneliness in Minori's heart. She knew that Minori's only wish for her 5th birthday was to meet her dad. Ichiro understood their pain, but he feared that seeing them would only bring more danger upon them from his ruthless family. Tragically, that was the same day she died in that car crash. Ichiro confessed he was consumed by regret. He knew he didn't deserve her forgiveness, but he vowed that from that moment on he would do anything she asked. Minori looked him in the eye and told him he didn't have to wait for the future, she had a job for him right now. She laid out the truth of her situation. "This is the only way you can ever make it up to us," she said. When Minori returned home, her mother-in-law was still playing her shocked act. She pretended to be stunned that Minori was the secret daughter of a billionaire family. She tried to fish for information. "You must have had so much to talk about with your father after 30 years, right?" Minori played it cool. She told her that a father who's been missing for 30 years doesn't inspire much love, they mostly just talked about money. Inside, the mother-in-law was doing a victory dance. Everything was going according to her 17-year plan. She was finally going to be rich beyond her wildest dreams, but she had to keep her sad face on for just a little longer. She kindly advised Minori to focus on the funeral and leave the money talk for later. "Thank you, Mom," Minori said, watching her go. The mother-in-law couldn't care less about the funeral or the dead grandfather. In her head, she was already booking luxury vacations and shopping for designer clothes. But the more beautiful the dream, the more brutal the reality. The first gift Chairman Ichiro delivered was cutting off her income. When she was suddenly fired, the mother-in-law was shocked, but she tried to rationalize it. She figured she was about to inherit a fortune anyway, so maybe this was just the universe telling her to get used to a life of leisure. But then, every other job she had also fired her. She realized something was very wrong. Having a guilty conscience herself, the first person she suspected was Kishiro. She confronted Minori. "What did you tell your father?" "I feel like only the Kishiro group has the power to get me blacklisted from every job like this." Looking at the haggard, desperate woman before her, Minori stopped hiding the truth. "You're right, I did it." The mother-in-law nearly fainted. She shrieked, demanding to know why Minori would do such a thing. Minori calmly replied, "Don't be so angry. I can actually get you a job at the Kishiro estate as a maid. That big company you worked for back then was the Kishiro group, wasn't it?" Minori told her that Ichiro had agreed to the idea immediately. After all, they had an unpaid debt from 30 years ago. That was when Ichiro found out that she was the one who sold the story of his affair to the press. Now, it was time to settle the score for both the old grudge and the new betrayal. The mother-in-law's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor. Minori stepped closer and reminded her of her dreams of luxury and travel. "You should probably think twice about that. You aren't getting a single penny. Every one of your greedy fantasies? Forget them." Broken and desperate, the woman screamed, accusing Minori of deceiving her. "I deceived you?" Minori thought, disgusted by the woman's sheer audacity to play the victim. The shouting woke up Minori's son, Tsubasa. In her blind rage, the mother-in-law turned and began snapping at the boy. Tsubasa looked at her with pure terror and cried out, "You're a bad person! I hate you!" The mother-in-law realized too late that she had lost control. Now, even her own grandson despised her. With the last of her doubts finally cleared, Minori knew what she had to do. It was time to cut the cord and excise Yudai's toxic family from her life forever. And karma was already moving fast. At Yudai's office, the clients he had spent months winning over were suddenly canceling their contracts one by one. Before he could even wrap his head around the disaster, a coworker told him a handsome young man was waiting to see him. It was Wataru. Yudai panicked, his mind racing for a way to handle the boy. But Wataru didn't give him a chance to speak. Right there, in front of the entire office, Wataru dropped a bomb. "I want you to break up with my mother." The office went dead silent before erupting into whispers. In a single sentence, the perfect family man image Yudai had spent 17 years building was shredded to pieces. His co-workers were buzzing with the juicy scandal. Realizing his reputation was toast, Yudai lost it. He dragged Wataru away and turned into a monster, screaming at the boy for not talking to him in private and embarrassing him at work. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he hissed. Wataru looked at him coldly. He had expected this. This was the only way to force Yudai to face the mess he'd made. Yudai then dared to call Wataru ungrateful. I raised you for over a decade, and this is how you repay me? You're a backstabbing brat. Hearing those words, Wataru's heart hardened. He realized this man was never a father, he was just a parasite. He felt a wave of despair, realizing that the only person in the world who truly understood his pain was Minori. Minori felt the same. She had given this man 17 years of her life, only to be met with such a tragic, hollow ending. That evening, Yudai crawled home. Minori had prepared dinner just like any other night, but something was off. The entire table was covered in nothing but eggplant dishes. In Japan, this can carry several symbolic meanings, but looking at Yudai's face, it clearly wasn't a good sign. He tried to play it safe, forcing a fake smile. Your cooking is as amazing as always, honey, he said. Minori didn't blink. Compared to Riko's cooking, who's better? Yudai froze, the fork halfway to his mouth. What are you talking about? The look in Minori's eyes told him everything she knew. He started to stammer out a pathetic excuse, but she cut him off. Don't waste your breath. Didn't your mother call you? Yudai frantically checked his phone. Dozens of missed calls from his mom. You know everything? He whispered, his voice trembling. He begged her to stay calm and give him a chance to explain, but Minori just slammed a stack of surveillance photos onto the table. Even then, Yudai tried to gaslight her. Stay calm, just listen to me. When that didn't work, he tried the oldest trick in the book. He tried to use their son, Tsubasa, to guilt-trip her into staying. Minori just let out a cold, hollow laugh. She told him that instead of begging her, he should probably save that energy for Riko and the baby growing in her womb. That was the final nail in the coffin. Yudai realized she wasn't bluffing, she knew about the pregnancy too. He pleaded for her to remember their 17 years together, but Minori didn't hesitate. She slid the pre-drafted divorce papers across the table. Yudai and his mother were finally facing the music. But Minori wasn't done yet. Next, she went for Riko. Riko, however, tried to flip the script. She had the nerve to accuse Minori of being unethical, claiming she used her position as a teacher to seduce Wataru. Losing her mind, Riko demanded that Minori hand over her son. Wataru has been missing for a week. I have every reason to believe you kidnapped him. That's a crime. Minori fired back, her voice echoing with rage. And is an affair not a crime? Just because you won't go to jail for it, does that make it forgivable? I wanted you to feel exactly what it's like to lose someone you love. Are you joking? Riko screamed. The only joke here is you, Minori replied. Realizing she was losing the argument, Riko's tough girl act crumbled. She fell to her knees, sobbing and begging Minori to give her son back. Right at that moment, Wataru walked in. Seeing that he was safe, Riko's face immediately shifted back to anger, and she started to lash out at Minori again. But Wataru cut her off. He made it clear that Minori had nothing to do with his leaving, he hadn't even seen her in a week. Riko was hysterical. I'm your mother, why are you defending her? She must have seduced you or threatened you. Wataru looked his mother in the eye and silenced the room. It's not like that. I love her. I chose to love her on my own. Riko stood there, caught between rage and a twisted kind of disbelief. She couldn't understand what kind of magic Minori had used to make her son so obsessed with her. Wataru, did you know? Minori said, looking at the boy. Your mother was the one who cut my hair. What? Wataru gasped. But she never told Yudai about it, did she? Minori continued. Minori had always wondered why Riko kept their meeting a secret from Yudai, and now it all made sense. To put it bluntly, Riko was drowning in her own insecurity. She was terrified that if Yudai found out she had been in contact with his wife, he would panic and dump her. Riko knew deep down that being a mistress was shameful, and her sensitivity and low self-esteem forced her to hide the truth. Minori's words were like poisoned daggers stabbing straight into Riko's heart, causing her to completely break down. She became hysterical, screaming that Yudai only loved her, and that marriage was just a matter of time. We promised to raise the baby in my womb together, she wailed. Seeing his mother still living in this pathetic fantasy, Wataru told her to wake up. I'll come home, he said, but on one condition. What condition? Riko asked desperately. You have to cut all ties with Yudai. That man brings nothing but disaster to everyone he touches. Minori is going to divorce him anyway. So who do you choose? Me or Yudai? Decide now. Setting aside the romance, it was an easy question to answer. Riko chose her son. Later, she went to find Yudai. Having just been discarded by Minori, Yudai was desperate for comfort and ran straight to Riko. He told her with a serious face that he had finally decided to divorce Minori. I'll marry you soon and be a real father to Wataru, he promised. But this time, Yudai's calculations were dead wrong. Riko finally realized that what they had wasn't love. We were just pawns used by your mother to get what she wanted, she told him. How stupid. I've been lied to by you for over a decade. She realized that in Yudai's heart, he had always loved Minori. That was why he never seriously considered Riko's feelings and always made excuses to push her away. Yudai realized Wataru must have gotten to her and tried to backtrack. It's not what Wataru thinks. He's just a kid. He's clearly misunderstood things. Riko just let out a hollow laugh. As a mother, she no longer saw Wataru as a child who didn't understand the world. If anything, she felt utterly ashamed. We adults. We aren't even as good as a child, she whispered. As Riko turned to walk away, Yudai played his last trump card, the unborn baby. You can't raise that child alone, he shouted. Riko didn't even look back. I'm not alone anymore, she replied, meaning she had Wataru. Lost and defeated, Yudai wandered the streets, drowning his sorrows in alcohol. He couldn't believe his perfect life had crumbled to this. He happened to run into Kumi, a young girl from his office who had always admired him. Kumi tried to comfort him, saying that an affair was no big deal. She asked, "If you like someone, why should you suppress yourself? That goes against human nature." Even as a scumbag himself, Yudai was actually shocked by how cold Kumi's words were. "Thank you," he said, feeling grateful that at least someone was on his side. He offered to take her to dinner to show his thanks, but Kumi's tone shifted instantly. "Don't get it wrong. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just looking at it from a human perspective. It's normal to prefer the new over the old. But getting caught is a different story. A man can be evil, but he can't be stupid, especially the ones who look down on women." She looked him dead in the eye and delivered a final blow. "Go to hell, you scumbag!" Because of the scandal, Yudai was demoted at work and hit with a massive pay cut. His coworker, Akagi, couldn't wrap his head around it. "I don't believe you cheated just for the money," Akagi said. "How many 17 years does a person get in a lifetime? If you didn't love your wife, how could you have lived with her for 17 years? Just thinking about that makes my skin crawl." Akagi had hit the nail on the head. If Yudai hadn't loved Minori, he could never have endured it this long. Claiming his mother wanted to steal her assets was just a pathetic excuse to justify his betrayal. By the time he realized this, it was far too late. The next day, Minori returned to the house. It was a complete disaster, and Yudai looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. Seeing the divorce agreement still sitting on the table unsigned, she asked when he was going to finish it. Yudai dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness. He admitted he had failed to cherish the happiness he had, and only now realized that Minori was the person he loved most. He confessed that while he initially approached her for money on his mother's orders, the life they built together and their son, Tsubasa, were the only things that were real. Minori listened to Yudai's words with a mixture of mockery and bitterness. Her heart was a chaotic mess of emotions. Yudai looked at her, sounding more desperate than ever. "I've truly realized my mistakes this time," he pleaded. "From now on, I will change. Please, give me one more chance. You and Tsubasa are the only things that matter to me in this world." Minori stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cold, dangerous whisper. "Everything I did, it wasn't because I wanted an apology. I did it for revenge. I even went as far as using an innocent kid like Wataru just to hurt you. Do you have any idea how much it hurts to be betrayed by the person you trusted most? I wanted you and Riko to feel that exact same pain. And yet, you have the nerve to beg for forgiveness? I was being merciful by not tearing you two apart with my bare hands. You will never understand how much a woman's 17 years of youth actually mean." Yudai, still trying to play the hero, insisted he understood. "From now on, I will spend every day making it up to you and Tsubasa." But to Minori, these late declarations of love were cheaper than trash on the street. She could never forgive a lie that had been sustained for 17 years. A simple apology wasn't enough to pay for his crimes. Only punishment would leave a lasting mark. To her, a divorce only had meaning if he truly felt the agonizing pain of loss. The next day, as soon as the divorce papers were finalized, Minori took Tsubasa and prepared to leave that city of heartbreak forever. But just as she was about to board her car, Wataru called out to her, begging her to stay. "Just having you near me is enough," he cried. "I won't ask for anything else." Minori looked at him with genuine sadness. "I'm sorry, Wataru," she said. "In my obsession with revenge, I dragged you into this mess. Now that it's over, I can't keep living with this mistake. I'm so sorry." Wataru shook his head. "You don't need to apologize. You're the one who taught me what love really is." After the divorce, Yudai's life hit rock bottom. He was demoted to working as a lowly security guard at a remote outpost. Every day at noon, he sat alone, eating a plain piece of bread just to survive. He couldn't help but remember the days when his wife would pack him beautiful, delicious bento boxes. He was finally reaping exactly what he had sown. As for Minori, she moved to the countryside and opened a family-themed cafe. Before long, it became quite famous in the area. Seeing her success, her best friend suggested, "Maybe it's time you started a new relationship?" Minori felt a blush creep up her neck. Recently, a regular customer had introduced her to a single father named Taguchi. He was a decent man, quite as handsome as her ex-husband, but he seemed honest and reliable. "I'm thinking about giving it a shot and going on a date with him," she admitted. By a stroke of coincidence, Taguchi's son was in the same class as Minori's son. But just as she was feeling hopeful about a fresh start, a familiar figure stepped back into her life. Minori couldn't believe her eyes. After 7 long years, Wataru was standing right there in front of her. Wataru explained that he had been assigned to teach at the local school. Minori was so flustered, she almost ran away. She couldn't believe this was a coincidence. She had chosen this remote, secluded village specifically to forget the past. How could Wataru have found her? It didn't make sense. What surprised her even more was when Wataru showed up at her cafe. When she asked why he chose this specific village, he explained that he had done a training internship here back in college and fell in love with the scenery. He claimed that after graduating, he specifically requested to be stationed here. Whether that was the whole truth or not, Minori congratulated him on achieving his dream of becoming a teacher. "You actually did it," she said. "You're a teacher now." Wataru didn't care about the congratulations. Instead, he looked at her with a heavy, intense gaze. "I'm 25 now," he emphasized. "I'm not that little boy from back then anymore." Minori understood exactly what he meant. The childish look in his eyes was gone, replaced by the gaze of a determined, mature man. She felt flustered. "Well, I'm practically a 40-year-old lady now. 25 is still so young. Just focus on your work, okay?" Wataru stepped closer. Don't pretend, Minori. You know exactly what I'm saying. Why won't you give me a straight answer? In all these years, my feelings for you haven't changed even once. Just as Wataru was about to say more, Taguchi and a group of other parents walked into the cafe. Seeing Taguchi and Minori laughing and talking so comfortably together, Wataru's face darkened with jealousy. The other mothers in the group began praising Wataru for his good looks, saying he must have inherited his mother's great genes. Do you have any other siblings? One of them asked. Wataru looked toward Minori and replied, Yes, I have a younger sister. The conversation in the cafe sent a flood of painful memories rushing back to Minori. Wataru knew these topics were a minefield, but he didn't know how to brush off the over-enthusiastic parents. Meanwhile, Taguchi, being a perceptive man, quickly noticed that Minori's mood had shifted. The mothers, oblivious to the tension, began passing around photos of Wataru's younger sister, gushing to Minori about how adorable the girl was. Minori forced a hollow smile, trying to play along, but she was so distracted that she dropped a glass. It shattered on the floor, and a shard sliced right into her finger. Taguchi immediately jumped into action, gallantly helping her bandage the wound, while Wataru could do nothing but watch with daggers in his eyes. Seizing the momentum, Taguchi asked Minori out for a private date over the coming weekend. Wataru glared at him, then looked at Minori, desperately hoping she would see his frustration. But Minori didn't look his way. Thank you, she said to Taguchi. Let's stay in touch over the phone. I'm really looking forward to it. Wataru felt like his heart was being ripped out. He was so upset he nearly burst into tears as he stormed out of the shop. Thanks for the treat, he called out bitterly. Minori thought Wataru would finally give up, but as she was closing the shop that night, she felt a sudden, icy chill down her spine. Wataru had returned, looking fuming. Please, just stop bothering me, Minori sighed. She told him she wanted him to see her only as a teacher or a student's parent, nothing more. She didn't want any more misunderstandings. But Wataru snapped, saying he couldn't stand the thought of her dating Taguchi. That is none of your business, she shot back. It is my business. I care about you, Mr. Wataru. I came here to start a new life, Minori said firmly. And right now, I want to get to know Mr. Taguchi better. Wataru wanted to keep fighting, but Minori's son, Tsubasa, suddenly walked in. The atmosphere turned awkward instantly, and Wataru was forced to retreat. When the weekend arrived, Minori closed the shop for her date with Taguchi. Tsubasa was fully supportive. I'm staying at a friend's house tonight, Mom. Don't worry about me, Taguchi laughed. Kids these days are so grown up. My daughter said the exact same thing. He admitted that with his daughter entering puberty, there were things she couldn't discuss with a father, and he truly wanted to find a mother figure for her. While she agreed to the date, Minori wasn't ready to dive into a serious relationship just yet. She decided to be honest about her past. I have a dark side, she told him. I hold grudges. I'm not sure I even deserve to be happy. Taguchi looked at her kindly and told her not to be so hard on herself. People who are truly dark-hearted don't feel pain or guilt over it, he reminded her. On the way back, Taguchi couldn't hide his curiosity any longer. He asked about her connection with Wataru. He could sense they had a history that went far beyond a typical teacher-parent relationship. Minori didn't see the point in lying anymore. She confirmed that Wataru was her former student, and it was a complete shock to run into him here. When they parted ways, Minori's phone buzzed. It was a message from Wataru. He still hadn't given up, trying one more time to flirt with her. But then Taguchi also sent a heartfelt confession. Knowing about her past only made him want to protect her more. I promise I won't let you get hurt again, he wrote. Back at the cafe, the local moms were dying to know if she had accepted Taguchi. Wataru sat in the corner, his heart racing as he waited for the answer. I told him I need some time to think, Minori said. After the parents left, Wataru saw his chance to pour his heart out. Minori, about that. Thank you, Mr. Wataru, she said, cutting him off before he could start. She wasn't going to give him an opening. But then, a voice from the doorway made the world stop. It's been a long time. Minori looked up and felt her blood turn to ice. It was Riko. It was like seeing a ghost from her darkest nightmares. Minori scrambled to close the cafe door, her heart pounding. She wasn't remotely prepared for this. You're still trying to seduce my son behind my back? Riko hissed. I won't let you get away with it this time. Wataru was humiliated and furious that his mother had tracked him down, feeling like he was being stalked. Riko couldn't comprehend what magic Minori had that kept her son obsessed even after 7 years. She screamed at Wataru to wake up, telling him the relationship was wrong and sinful. She reminded him that Minori was Yudai's ex-wife. That fact alone should have buried any chance they had. Wataru knew she was right, but he couldn't accept it. Why do I have to suffer for the sins of my parents? He yelled. He eventually went back to the cafe to apologize to Minori. I tried to be so careful, he said, looking defeated. But she still found out I was here. I'm so sorry she's bothering you again. Wataru confessed the suffocating truth. Out of a desperate fear of losing her only anchor, his mother's control over him had become absolute over the past 7 years. He hadn't been allowed to even speak to another woman. Now that his little sister was 7 and no longer needed constant care, he had secretly escaped to this town just to breathe. He finally had a chance to live his own life. Minori understood his pain, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. As she turned to walk away, Wataru pulled her back and wrapped her in a tight, desperate embrace. He wasn't rushing her for an answer. He only wanted her to fulfill a promise they made 7 years ago. Once he passed his university exams, they would go to the aquarium in Kanagawa together. Just one time is enough, he pleaded. Can you just look at me seriously for once? Seeing the raw sincerity in his eyes, Minori found it impossible to say no. Realizing she could no longer control Wataru, Riko was forced to seek out Yudai for help. 7 years had turned Yudai's life into a nightmare. His house was a literal dumping ground, overflowing with trash. His mother had been a shell of a person ever since Minori's punishment, locking herself in her room for 7 years, stripped of all the vitality she once had. She was drowning in deep depression. When Yudai heard about Wataru and Minori, he was absolutely floored. Riko warned him, "Think about it. If they actually end up together, our family ties become a twisted mess, and our reputations will be permanently trashed." She was determined to stop them and needed Yudai's cooperation. When the weekend arrived, Minori found herself unconsciously dressing up. Her son, Tsubasa, assumed she was going on another date with Taguchi, but at the meeting spot Minori had already made up her mind to crush Wataru's hopes. "You should go out with someone else," she told him. She gave him a sad smile and added, "There is no future for us. Don't waste your time and effort on me. You'll find someone better, Wataru. I hope you find your true soulmate soon." With those final words, she turned to walk away, but suddenly, the sky opened up with a torrential downpour. Wataru grabbed her hand and pulled her into an abandoned building to seek shelter. Looking at the soaking wet Wataru, Minori couldn't help but feel a pang of worry. The scene was a haunting echo of 7 years ago. For Wataru, she was still as gentle and captivating as ever, making it impossible for him to let go. He was convinced she was his destiny. Minori couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze and instinctively looked away. "You don't have to hide your feelings," Wataru said softly. "We aren't the ones who did anything wrong. Why should we be the ones to atone for other people's sins? If you're determined to carry all that guilt, then I'll carry it with you." The air in the room became heavy with an undeniable lingering tension. But just as they were lost in the moment, a phone call shattered the silence. It was Tsubasa. He had found out his mother wasn't actually with Taguchi. With Taguchi's permission, the boy called Minori, begged her to come home because of the heavy rain. That call was the wake-up call Minori needed. Logic finally won over emotion. She hurriedly said goodbye and fled. The feelings she had suppressed for 7 years were now out in the open, and she had no idea how to face Wataru, let alone how to answer Taguchi's proposal. In the midst of her dilemma, Taguchi took the initiative. He confessed that he had seen Wataru hugging her that day, but promised, "I'll keep your secret." He was still deeply curious about her history with Mr. Wataru, so Minori decided to tell him the whole truth. After hearing everything, Taguchi felt even more protective of her. He believed she shouldn't have to carry that guilt alone. "Just like you, I was also betrayed. I understand that pain," he said. "Stop torturing yourself." Minori understood his underlying message. If she chose Wataru, she would never find true peace. Meanwhile, Tsubasa took it upon himself to find Wataru and demand that he leave his mother alone. He had eavesdropped on their conversation and, even though he didn't understand everything, he could tell his mother was deeply distressed. He couldn't stand to see her sad. The scene was a mirror image of years ago, when Wataru himself had warned Yudai to stay away from his mother. "If you keep bothering her, I will protect my mother by any means necessary," Tsubasa warned. Just as Minori was struggling to untangle this emotional web, an anonymous letter arrived that sent her into a state of pure panic. She racked her brain, trying to figure out who it could be. As far as she knew, the only people who knew about her and Wataru were Taguchi, Riko, and Tsubasa. At first, the most likely person to have written that anonymous letter seemed to be Taguchi. Minori felt her world crumbling. She had trusted Taguchi enough to share her deepest secrets with him, and now she felt betrayed. "Why would you do this?" she demanded. Taguchi picked up the letter, looking completely innocent. "I know your secret," he said, "but I'm not such a scumbag that I'd use it to blackmail you." Right at that moment, the cafe door swung open, and Yudai, her ex-husband, walked in looking absolutely pathetic and haggard. Minori had tried to keep both Yudai and Tsubasa at a distance, but the reality was that blood ties are hard to break. Thinking about Tsubasa's need for a complete family, and seeing that 7 years of misery had seemingly made Yudai truly repentant, Minori began to feel that going back to him might be the most ideal choice for her son's sake. Naturally, Wataru couldn't accept this, but then he remembered a conversation he had with Tsubasa a few days prior. Even an elementary school kid could see that the most suspicious person, the one likely sending the threats, was Wataru's mother, Riko. "Even if it's not your mom, ever since you showed up, my mom hasn't been happy for a single day," Tsubasa had told him. Wataru felt a wave of guilt. "I understand. I'm sorry," he replied. Despite his own feelings, Wataru just wanted Minori to be happy. The next day, Taguchi informed Minori that the cafe's online review page was being flooded with nasty, negative comments. He urged her to go to the police, warning that rumors spread like wildfire in a small town like theirs. Minori hesitated. She feared that if the police investigated and found out Wataru's mother was behind it, it would ruin Wataru's career. Seeing her indecisiveness, Taguchi snapped. "Are you even thinking about Tsubasa's feelings? If these rumors spread, do you have any idea how he'll be treated?" He had a point. The cafe's business began to tank, and Tsubasa started being ostracized by his friends. Wataru also needed to know if his mother was the one sending the threats. To help Minori find the culprit, he bought a train ticket to Tokyo to confront Riko. But the moment he opened the door to her house, a foul, rotting stench hit his nose. The place was a disaster zone, and Riko was lying motionless on the table. Wataru checked her pulse. She was still breathing. He immediately asked where his little sister was. Riko suddenly became hysterical. "It's been 7 years. Why won't you just leave me alone?" It turned out that someone had been posting vicious comments on Riko's hair salon website, exposing her past as a mistress and ruining her business. The rumors had even reached the younger sister's kindergarten. "Am I an illegitimate child?" the little girl had asked. Riko was forced to take a long leave of absence for her daughter and send her away to the countryside. She was convinced that Minori was behind everything. "So, did you get revenge on her?" Wataru asked, his voice low. Riko looked at him, confused. "Stop pretending. Mom, you're the one who sent the threat letter to Minori, aren't you?" Hearing that Minori was being threatened too, Riko suddenly remembered she had received a pile of similar threat letters herself. Wataru looked at them and realized the handwriting and style were identical to the one Minori received. He realized he had misjudged his mother. This time, the person behind the scenes was targeting both Riko and Minori, wanting to destroy them both simultaneously. He wanted to tell Minori immediately, but Riko stopped him. She had lost everything and couldn't bear to lose her only son. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't live with you anymore," Wataru said. He decided to move out on his own until Riko truly felt remorse. Back in town, even though Wataru hadn't found the culprit, he knew one thing. The attacker hated both women and wanted them both ruined. He started thinking it over and realized Yudai was acting very suspiciously. Yudai might have been manipulating public opinion to force Minori to run back into his arms for protection. Wataru marched over to Yudai's house. "You orchestrated those threat letters yourself to win Minori back, didn't you?" he accused. Yudai looked genuinely confused. "I have no reason to hurt Minori anymore," he claimed. But Wataru countered that only a handful of people knew his sister was an illegitimate child. Yudai had to admit that made sense. Suddenly, the bedroom door opened. Yudai's mother, the woman who had supposedly been a shut-in for 7 years, stepped out. "Is that true?" she asked. She began scolding Yudai, asking why he couldn't let go of the past, even after 7 years. "You've got it all wrong, Mom. It wasn't me," Yudai pleaded. His mother urged him to go to the police and confess, telling him not to let hatred blind his judgment. "The person who should be going to the police is you." Minori suddenly appeared in the doorway. She looked at her former mother-in-law and said, "Stop acting. Your performance is great, but you weren't quite smart enough to pull this off." Minori stood her ground, her voice cold as ice. "Did you really forget who my father is?" she asked her former mother-in-law. "He's the chairman of the Kishiro group. All I had to do was ask his legal team to investigate, and they easily traced the IP addresses of the online comments and the origin of the threat letters. Plus, you left your fingerprints all over them." Minori admitted she had initially suspected Riko. But 7 years ago, Riko had chosen Wataru and abandoned Yudai, proving she wasn't low enough to destroy her own son's reputation just for a petty grudge. Only the mother-in-law had the criminal record for this kind of behavior. She was a woman who would even use her own son as a pawn to get what she wanted. "Stop lying," Minori commanded. Seeing no way out, the mother-in-law finally dropped the act. Her face twisted with pure malice as she admitted everything. She believed Minori was the one who deserved to suffer. "It's your fault I've lived in hell for the last 7 years," she screamed. "I couldn't find a job, and people mocked me wherever I went. I kept asking myself why my life turned out like this, and then I realized it was all because of you." Wataru couldn't understand why his grandmother would target his mother Riko as well. At the mention of Riko's name, the mother-in-law's rage boiled over even more. She felt it was unfair that Yudai and Riko were the ones who had the affair. Yet Riko had spent the last 7 years living a peaceful life, running a successful salon, while she suffered. She then turned her venom on Yudai, calling him a failure. She screamed that if he had just stuck to her original plan and stayed married to Minori for the money, they wouldn't be in this mess. But no, his head was too full of love for Riko. "Mother!" Yudai yelled. "Don't call me mother!" she snapped back. "I've recorded everything you just said," Minori told her, advising her to go to the police and confess quietly. But the woman wasn't going down without a fight. In a fit of desperate rage, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen sink and lunged at Minori. Wataru didn't hesitate. He threw himself in front of Minori to take the blow. But in a shocking twist, Yudai moved with a burst of speed no one expected, catching the blade with his bare hands to protect them both. "Enough. Just stop it," Yudai groaned. He told his mother that they were simply reaping what they had sown. They had lost their jobs and their reputations, but if they could just let go of the hatred, maybe they could finally find some peace. But the mother-in-law was too far gone. She refused to apologize and stormed out of the house. The moment she stepped outside, she ran straight into Chairman Kishiro. He told her he had no idea she could be this stubborn, and realized the punishment he gave her 7 years ago was clearly too light. "My mercy almost got my daughter hurt again," he growled. He ordered his men to take her to the police station. "Wait!" Yudai called out. He wanted to go with his mother to atone for their sins together. Before he left, he turned to Minori one last time and apologized. Perhaps it was the moment he risked his life to stop the knife, but Minori finally found it in her heart to forgive him, though they both knew there was no going back. Yudai promised he would finally take responsibility for his mother and ensure she never hurt anyone again. He vowed to stay out of Tsubasa's life so as not to cause any more pain. "Please," he whispered, "just live a good life." Seeing Yudai's sincere remorse and Wataru's heroic sacrifice deeply moved Minori. She was finally ready to give Wataru a real chance. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, her phone rang. It was Riko, and she was threatening to kill herself and Wataru. When they raced to the rooftop, they found a pair of shoes left neatly on the ledge. Wataru looked down, his heart in his throat. "It's too late," he gasped. But Riko hadn't jumped. She stepped out from the shadows, laughing hysterically. "My acting is pretty great, isn't it?" Ha ha ha, she was clearly in a state of mental collapse. She looked at Wataru and said his eyes looked exactly like his father's, the man who had seduced her in college and promised her the world, only to vanish the moment she got pregnant. When she finally saw him again years later, he was already with a new girl. I hate him. I want to kill him in my dreams every night. Hearing Riko's story, Minori felt a sudden, sharp pang of empathy. She realized that, in the end, they were both just broken women who had been destroyed by men, eventually letting that pain turn into a blind, poisonous hatred. Wataru, you're all I have left, Riko sobbed. She reminded him that 7 years ago, she had chosen him over Yudai. Please, choose me. But Wataru couldn't give her what she wanted. You've never once stopped to ask yourself how much you hurt Minori, he shouted. Seeing her son side with her rival again, Riko spiraled. Why only me? She screamed. She argued that she wasn't the one who seduced Yudai. She was a victim of his sweet talk too. I was just a girl who was crazy in love. And the moment I saw his true face, I left him without hesitation. Seeing Riko spiraling out of control, Minori slowly and calmly walked toward her. What are you going to do? Riko screamed, backed against the edge. Are you going to hit me? Are you going to push me off? Fine. Go ahead and do it. My life is already over anyway. But instead of a strike, Minori reached out and pulled Riko into a warm, tight embrace. She whispered that she truly understood how Riko felt. They were both women who had been deeply scarred by men, eventually letting that poison of hatred blind their judgment. But I realize now, Minori said softly, that revenge is just a cycle of hurting one another. It's meaningless. There are no winners here. We've both been punished, and we dragged Tsubasa and Wataru down with us. We ended up hurting the most important people in our lives. With tears in her eyes, Minori begged Riko to let go of the hate. But, what am I supposed to do now? Riko sobbed. Minori didn't have an answer for that. Some paths you have to find on your own. Wataru stepped forward then, wrapping his arms around his mother. Mom, please learn to take care of yourself, he said. A woman doesn't need a man to have a good life. Mom, please, stay strong. In that moment, the world felt still, leaving Riko alone with her wounds, but finally given a chance to heal. Back in the quiet countryside, Taguchi gave Minori one last piece of advice. He told her to finally release the past. What's done is done. Let it go. Stop torturing yourself. Only when you open your heart to the future can you truly find happiness again. Let's be happy together. Taguchi's words were the final wake-up call Minori needed, but they also helped her realize where her heart truly belonged. She finally chose Wataru. She admitted to herself and to him that she had loved him for a long time, which was exactly why she had tried so hard to push him away. The truth is, I've always liked you, she confessed. Overcome with emotion, Wataru stood up and pulled her into his arms, promising to protect her forever. I love you, he whispered. I love you too, she replied. Wataru told Minori he needed a little more time. I want to go back to the city to work on myself, he explained. I want to become stronger so I can truly be the man who protects you. Minori wanted to remind him that she was a wealthy lady now, and he didn't need to work that hard. But seeing his burning passion and desire to grow, she couldn't bring herself to dampen his spirit. Okay, she smiled. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, a year had passed. While visiting her mother's grave, Minori ran into Chairman Kishiro. She curiously asked how her former mother-in-law was doing. Ichiro looked surprised. Why do you still care about someone who tried to hurt you so many times? After everything, she was still family once, Minori replied. Even though she had taken the woman to the police that day, Minori never pressed charges, so she was released. Kishiro had even given her a job, hoping she would change. But the chairman looked at Minori and shook his head. Some people never change. She will, Minori insisted. Just like you did. But just as the words left her mouth, one of his assistants called to report that the mother-in-law had caused trouble again and had been taken away. Some people will always repeat their mistakes, Kishiro sighed. Deep down, I think I've always known that. As for the others, Riko finally let go of her resentment and started a brand new life. Yudai began working tirelessly to earn money to support his 2 children. Things were finally looking up for him. Tsubasa entered his rebellious phase a bit early and started acting like his mother's attention was annoying, but the moment he saw Taguchi's daughter, his whole attitude flipped. Have you been waiting long? Good morning, he chirped. Ah, the sweet smell of young love. Minori's best friend went on to become a high-powered, top-tier lawyer, and before long, Wataru finished his training and returned to the countryside. Welcome home, Minori said as she saw him. Once again, thank you all for joining us on this journey through this incredible story.